Judith Jarvis Thomson famously created a useful but incomplete thought experiment to defend abortion. In this thought experiment, you wake up one day and you are connected to a sick violinist's circulatory system. The violinist will die unless they stay connected to you for 9 months, feeding off your body to cure their illness. After 9 months, you will be unharmed and both of you will survive. This thought experiment seeks to demonstrate how forcing someone to give up their bodily autonomy to save another is not justified. This analogy fits well for abortion in cases of rape, but does not map on well to situations beyond this. This analogy alone does not account for cases of consensual sex, nor does it dive into the more nuanced objections to abortion. While abortion in cases of rape is only part of abortion statistics, this thought experiment provides the perfect starting point for further logical groundwork yet to be laid. In cases of rape, it is incompatible with a robust idea of liberty to posit that a pregnant woman does not have a fundamental right to choose to terminate the pregnancy. In a rape case, the victim did not consent to anything. The fetus is a trespasser on the most sacred of property, one's body. There is no obligation owed to the fetus. It is not entitled to take and use another's body without consent. This is true regardless of if the life to be saved is a fetus or a fully grown adult. If one wishes to argue to the contrary, they may do so while perhaps being internally consistent, but only if they disavow all alliances with liberty and bodily autonomy. To account for the gaps in Thomson's analogy, imagine the following thought experiment. Your son, who is several years old, dies. He can be revived from death only if you, and only you, voluntarily connect to his body via a machine that feeds off your body in the same way a pregnancy would. Once the machine is connected, he is brought back to life. But if the machine is disconnected any time before he becomes independently viable, several months, he will die. The government has no place in forcing you to stay connected to the machine. Even though you consented to the procedure, you should have the right to withdraw at any time, as you have ownership over your body and your child is still not entitled to it in this instance. One can revoke consent at any time, and no ethical doctor worth their salt would force the parent to stay connected. With this analogy in mind, it can be conceded that life begins at conception and that the fetus has all the moral and biological equivalency of a fully grown human, while still maintaining a pro-choice position. This analogy also holds in a case where a person engaging in consensual sex does so with the understanding that pregnancy could be the result, or in the case where someone has sex with the express consensual purpose of getting pregnant. In the thought experiment, life is at stake, and the parent voluntarily creates the bodily connection with the express purpose of creating life from non-life. It may be morally preferable and applaudable for the parent to choose not to disconnect from the machine, and many would think it evil and immoral to choose to disconnect. But the government must not be the virtue police. Whether in this thought experiment or abortion in real life, the government has no legitimacy in using coercion and the threat of violence to prevent someone from exercising their bodily autonomy, even if one considers that exercise to be immoral. Bodily autonomy and ownership of oneself remain the key considerations that invalidate government injunctions to the contrary. One possible consequence of this necromancy thought experiment might be that abortion restrictions are justified when the baby can be viable outside of the womb. If the baby can be viable, then removing the baby from the womb may need to be done in such a way as to preserve its life, so long as the process does not involve non-consensually damaging the mother's body or endangering her life. By the same token, if the mother wants an abortion, it may have to be done in a way where the baby's bodily autonomy is not infringed on. In the thought experiment, the parent cannot shoot their son or remove his body parts to disconnect the machine. The parent can only sever the connection or do something to their own body to disconnect it. In cases where the fetus is not viable, there may be more leeway for the mother's chosen means of an abortion, depending on the specific circumstance. If medicine eventually advances so that a fetus can be viable outside of the womb immediately after conception, then perhaps the fetus is not entitled to the mother's or anyone else's money or efforts to operate the life-sustaining machines. Perhaps only voluntary donations from individuals, charities, or private hospitals could be used to keep the fetus alive outside the womb. Then again, a parent may have a duty to care for and support their non-adult child. This duty would not supersede parental bodily rights, but perhaps it would extend to a parent's efforts to keep their fetus viable outside the womb by getting medical support. Or perhaps the parent could give the fetus up for adoption, so to speak, and let that duty fall on the legal guardian that takes over. Details like this can be ironed out with the thought experiment and its variations in mind. Notwithstanding, The thought experiment only provides the minimal protection requirements for abortion, as it attempts to paint the situation in the light most favorable to the pro-life position. Among other things, it treats abortion as if the fetus is equivalent to a human that has already been born, which may or may not be the case. Additionally, pregnancy involves a myriad of risks and permanent health changes that are not present in the thought experiment. The debate on abortion regulation should center around the right to bodily autonomy. Pro-life positions do not weigh bodily rights of individuals over the interests of a fetus. Conservatives purport to be the party that has a monopoly on the ideas of limited government and individual liberty, but only adheres to these principles in some areas and rallies against them when convenient. For the left, the idea of limited government and my body, my choice doesn't seem to apply in many situations beyond abortion. Both sides need to end their hypocritical application of liberty that is pervasive in other areas besides just abortion. Both sides don't recognize rights that ought to be regarded as axiomatic.